I paid off my parents' debt and saved their house, but then they put it in my brother's name. Because I was just a girl. I was 23 when I walked into the bank and signed my name on the dotted line. My palms were sweaty, my heart was pounding, and I knew the decision I was making would change my life forever. Not because I was buying my dream house. Not because I was investing in a business. No, I was signing a loan agreement to pay off my parents' mortgage. The house I'd grown up in. The house I loved. The house we were about to lose. My name is Emma Carter, and for as long as I can remember, I've always been the good daughter. The dependable one. The responsible one. The one who never asked for much. I wasn't rebellious, loud, or dramatic like my older brother, Derek. He was the golden boy, charming, funny, a natural flirt, and our parents adored him. But me? I was the shadow, the background, the afterthought. Still, I never resented it. Not really. I told myself that love looks different for everyone. And that one day, they'd see me, not just as the helper or the listener, but as their daughter who mattered just as much. That day never came. It all started when Dad lost his job. He'd been working at the auto plant for nearly 30 years. Then, one afternoon, he came home early, his face gray and tight with panic. They laid off half the crew, he said, dropping his lunchbox on the counter. And I was one of them. Mom didn't cry. She just stared at the wall. But that silence? It was louder than any scream. Within months, the bills piled up. First the credit cards, then the car loans, then the house. I watched them unravel, slowly, quietly, as if they didn't know how to ask for help. Or maybe they were just too ashamed. And Derek? He was in Florida, living with his girlfriend, chasing one failed startup after another. He called occasionally, sent the odd meme in the family group chat. But when I mentioned the foreclosure notices, "Oh, that sucks," he said. "Tell Dad to get unemployment." That was it. So I stepped in. I had a decent job at a tech firm, data analyst, entry level. Not glamorous, but stable. I'd been saving for years, hoping to move into the city, maybe travel abroad, finally live a little. But every time I looked at Mom's tired eyes or saw Dad fall asleep with bills clutched in his hands, I knew I couldn't walk away. They were drowning, and I was the only one who knew how to swim. So I cashed out my savings, took a second job tutoring high schoolers on weekends, ate ramen for months, got rid of my apartment and moved back into my childhood bedroom, the one with the peeling glow and the dark stars on the ceiling. And then I did the unthinkable. I paid it all off. Every last penny. $178,430.56. I didn't even tell them at first. I wanted to surprise them. I remember the day I brought the final receipt home. Mom was in the kitchen, folding laundry. Dad was outside fixing the gutter. I held the paper out with shaking hands. "It's done," I whispered. "The house. It's yours again. We're safe." Mom blinked at the paper, then at me. "Oh, honey," she said. "You shouldn't have." That was it. No hug, no tears. No thank you. Just, "You shouldn't have." Dad came in later, slapped me on the back like I'd passed a math test. "Knew you'd come through," he said, grinning. "Our smart girl." I told myself it was just shock, that the real gratitude would come later. That someday, they'd sit me down and say, "Emma, we see you. We love you. We're proud." That day never came either. Instead, they started acting like the house had never been in danger. Like I'd never made that sacrifice. They hosted cookouts, invited the neighbors, boasted about how Derek might finally settle down and come home to take over the place someday. I laughed it off, bit my tongue, smiled through clenched teeth. But deep down, I was waiting for someone to remember. Then one night, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Mom and Dad were in the living room, talking in low voices. The TV was on, but I could still make out the words. "We should just transfer it now," Mom was saying. "It'll be cleaner. No drama later." "Yeah," Dad agreed. "Derek's the natural choice anyway. A man needs a legacy." I froze. Transfer what? I crept closer, heart hammering. Their voices dropped again. Emma doesn't need it, Mom continued. She's doing fine. She's always been independent. Besides, she's just a girl. She'll get married. Move on. Just a girl. Just a girl. I couldn't sleep that night. Couldn't breathe. I stared at the ceiling, those faded plastic stars mocking me. I thought of every shift I'd worked, every dream I'd shelved, every dollar I'd bled into saving this house. And now they were giving it to Derek, because I was a girl? The betrayal didn't come in a scream. It came in a whisper. In the quiet dismissal of everything I'd ever done. That night, something inside me broke. Not loudly. Not all at once. But enough to spark something dark and powerful in my chest. Something that whispered, if they don't see your worth, make them. Because this story wasn't over. It was just beginning. It happened on a rainy Wednesday. The kind of day where the skies hang low like a threat and the wind howls as if it knows your heart is about to break. I came home from work, soaked to the bone, my clothes clinging to my skin. I'd stayed late at the office, not because I had to, but because I couldn't bear to be in that house. Not lately. Not since I'd overheard that conversation. Since they'd called me just a girl. Since they'd decided, behind closed doors, that my sacrifices were invisible. Still, I wasn't prepared for what I saw that evening. Mom was at the kitchen table with a stack of documents and a pen in hand. Dad stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. Derek, of all people, sat at the head of the table, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. And maybe he had. Because in front of him, right there in black and white, was the deed to the house. I stood in the doorway, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. What is this? I asked slowly, though my gut already knew. They all turned, surprised to see me. Derek smirked. Dad looked uncomfortable. But it was Mom who answered, always calm, always polished. Oh, she said casually. We're transferring the title. We figured it's time to make things official. To who? I asked, though again, I already knew. To Derek, of course, Dad said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I stared at them. You're giving him the house? They didn't even flinch. He's the eldest, Mom said, as if that explained everything. And we want the house to stay in the family. He'll have children one day. It makes sense. I paid for IT. I snapped, my voice rising for the first time in years. That mortgage, the debt, I took care of that. With my savings. With my name on the bank's records. With my life on hold. Derek scoffed. Relax, you're not getting kicked out or anything. I turned on him. This isn't about staying or leaving. It's about what's right. Mom sighed like I was being dramatic. You'll get married someday. You'll have your own life. But this house? It's part of our legacy. It's not about money, it's about bloodline. It's tradition. And then it came again. That same awful phrase. You're just a girl. Something in me cracked open, not like glass, but like an earthquake. Slow at first. Then violent. You keep saying that like it means something, I whispered. It does mean something, Dad said. You're strong, Emma. You always land on your feet. Derek, he needs this more. Oh. So that was it. I was being punished for being strong. They were rewarding him for being weak. I looked at Derek, slouched, jobless, entitled, and for the first time, I didn't feel like his sister. I felt like a stranger. Like I was staring at someone who had stolen something sacred from me and didn't even feel guilty. Is the deed signed yet? I asked, my voice cold now. Not yet, Mom admitted. But we're going to the notary tomorrow. That's when I made my decision. Not all at once. Not with fire and fury. But with ice. Fine. Let them sign it. Let them celebrate. Because they had no idea what I'd done. No idea what name was already tied to that house behind the scenes. You see, I wasn't stupid. When I paid off the mortgage, I didn't do it blindly. The bank paperwork? The debt settlement? The new loan terms? I had made sure, very sure, that my name was listed as co-owner on all of it. Not their names. Not Derek's. Mine. Because even back then, a small, silent part of me didn't trust them. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was survival. So when I saw them planning to transfer the title, I knew something wasn't adding up. I spent the next week digging through every document I had, the bank emails, the mortgage release, the house records. And what I found confirmed everything. Legally, they couldn't give Derek the house because they didn't fully own it. I did. But instead of confronting them again, I decided to wait, to watch, to see how far they were willing to go to erase me. And they didn't disappoint. A few days later, I found out they booked a lawyer. They were trying to retitle the property using a loophole, claiming it had always been under their name and that my financial contributions were gifts from their daughter. They even forged an affidavit suggesting I'd willingly relinquished any claim. I sat in my room staring at the fake signature that looked almost like mine. Almost. Derek had always been good at copying my handwriting. He used to sign my school forms as a prank. I'd laughed back then. Now I wanted to scream. They were trying to erase me. Legally, financially, emotionally. But I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't threaten. I just smiled. Because I had something they didn't. Proof. Every bank transaction, every email, every official document showing that I was the one who saved the house. That I was legally entitled to it. That I had protected this family when they were too weak, too prideful, too sexist to do it themselves. And if they wanted to play dirty, I could play colder. Because I wasn't just a girl. I was a storm waiting to be unleashed. There's a moment when pain stops being pain and turns into something sharper. It becomes focus, precision, fire, frozen into a blade. That was the moment I stepped into the attorney's office. I need legal protection, I said, sliding my folder of documents across the polished mahogany desk. And I need it quietly. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. He was older, mid-50s maybe, with silver temples and an aura of practiced caution. You're not in trouble, are you? No, I said. But my family will be if they go through with what they're planning. His eyes scanned the papers, mortgage statements, loan agreements, notarized receipts, and the most important document of all, the amended deed listing me as a 50% legal co-owner of the property. Smart girl, he murmured. I almost laughed. He meant it as a compliment. But those two words, smart girl, felt like acid. I'd heard them all my life, usually followed by, but Derek is the man of the house. Or, but someday you'll understand your place. Not this time. I need a legal freeze on the title, I told him. I need to ensure no fraudulent transfer happens. I have proof they forged my signature too. He sat up straighter. That's a felony. I nodded. They think they'll get away with it because I'm quiet. Because I don't make scenes. But I'm not letting them erase me. He tapped a pen against the folder. You want to press charges? I hesitated. A part of me still ached to believe they'd stop before it came to that. But I couldn't afford to gamble with my future again. Not yet, I said, but I want a restraining order on the title and a legal warning issued. If they push this, I want to be ready. He smiled faintly. You already are. Over the next week, I watched the facade crumble. The lawyer filed a notice with the county, blocking all changes to the deed until full investigation and verification of signatures could be completed. That meant my parents couldn't gift or transfer the house without my signed consent, and that wasn't coming. Then came the letter. A legal cease and desist, delivered by courier right to our front door. I watched from the kitchen window as my dad took the envelope, tore it open, and went pale. He stormed into the house seconds later, shaking the paper in his hand. Did you do this? I set down my tea. Yes. You had a lawyer threaten us? Your own parents? No, I said calmly. I had a lawyer protect me. From my own parents. Mom entered next, holding her phone, already red-faced from whatever group chat meltdown she'd just endured. You're ruining the family, Emma, she snapped. Over what? A piece of paper? You've always been so dramatic. I stood facing them both, heart pounding but voice steady. No, I ruined your plan. The one where you let me drain my savings to save this house. and then quietly hand it over to your golden boy. The one where I'm expected to stay grateful while being erased. Dad slammed the paper down. You think Derek doesn't deserve something too? Deserve? I laughed, bitter and sharp. He hasn't lifted a finger. He hasn't made a single sacrifice. He didn't even call when the foreclosure notice came. He's family. So am I. They were stunned into silence. Then Mom whispered, You're going to regret this. And that's when I knew there was no saving this. Not the house. Not the relationship. Not the illusion of love. But I didn't regret a thing. Because for the first time in years, I was choosing me. I gave it 1 week. 1 full week of silence. No yelling. No threats. No further letters. But then I heard it. A call from the county clerk. They tried again. Tried to sneak the transfer through by saying I'd left the country, wasn't mentally well, and that Derek had durable power of attorney. They were done playing subtle. So I stopped playing nice. I filed a formal fraud report, submitted my signature samples, pulled the forged affidavit and the falsified power of attorney claim, had my lawyer push an injunction, and by Friday afternoon, their plan imploded. The house was frozen under a court hold. All financial actions blocked. And their lawyer? Furious. Because apparently, my parents had lied to him too. You'll hear from our new attorney, Dad growled red-faced. You might want to focus on a criminal attorney, I replied. The best part? I didn't even raise my voice. I moved out that weekend. Packed my things quietly, loading them into the back of a U-Haul. My friend Natalie offered me her guest room, and I accepted without hesitation. Mom didn't say goodbye. She just watched from the porch, arms crossed, like I was the problem. Derek sent me one message that night. You've always been jealous. Hope it was worth it. I didn't respond. Because it was worth it. Every file I'd saved. Every signature I tracked. Every whisper I turned into proof. They thought they could manipulate me because I was quiet. Because I was a girl. Because I played the role they needed. They forgot that the quiet ones watch everything. And we don't strike until we're certain. But this wasn't just about freezing a house deed. This wasn't just about stopping their plan. This was about reclaiming my power. And I wasn't done yet. Because the house? That was only the beginning. They took my kindness for weakness. Now I was going to show them what strength looked like in the coldest, most calculated way they'd never see coming. Revenge doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes it's cold, quiet, surgical. Sometimes it walks into a room with a smile and shakes your hand while holding the knife behind its back. And that's exactly how I planned it. Because while my parents and Derek scrambled to undo the legal damage I caused, desperate to regain control of the house they thought they owned, I was already 10 steps ahead. They thought freezing the deed was the end. But I was just getting started. I'd learned 2 things from working in data analysis. People hide things in plain sight. Everything leaves a trail. So I started digging. Not just into the house, but into my parents' entire financial history. And what I found was like gasoline waiting for a match. They had been receiving money, quietly, from my grandfather's inheritance. Monthly deposits. For over 6 years. Not a lot, but enough to pay the mortgage at least partially. So why had they told me the house was at risk? Why had they let me pay it off? Because they wanted me to. They knew I'd step up. Knew I wouldn't let the house go. Knew Derek was too irresponsible. They manipulated me. They used me. And then they planned to erase me from the story. I couldn't let that slide. I contacted the family estate attorney, the one who had managed my late grandfather's trust. After 2 meetings, some polite nudging, and a hint that something might be legally wrong, he agreed to dig into the trust distributions. Within 3 days, I had what I needed. My parents were never supposed to touch that money unless it was split equally between both children. But they'd funneled it to themselves, and Derek. Not me. And they'd signed documents saying they had no other children receiving support. Fraud. Documented. Certified. Email confirmed. I could have taken them to court. I could have sued them for every penny. But that wasn't revenge. That was just justice. What I wanted was something more surgical. So I made a decision. I contacted a real estate broker, listed the house. Yes, the one they were still living in. Because guess what? As a 50% co-owner, and the only one with clean legal rights, I had the power to force a partition sale through the court. And I did. My lawyer filed the motion. The court ruled in my favor. And just like that, they had 90 days to vacate. They didn't believe it at first. They tried to stall, begged the judge for more time. But fraud leaves fingerprints. And the court doesn't show mercy to people who forge signatures and misappropriate trust funds. I didn't even have to say a word in the final hearing. Just sat there, silent, calm, unmoved. Mom cried. Dad ranted. Derek tried to yell at the judge. Didn't matter. The house was going on the market. And the sale proceeds? Legally split between the two co-owners. 50% to me. 50% to, well, not them, not yet. Because remember that inheritance fraud? Yeah. The estate lawyer filed a recovery claim against their share. So my parents wouldn't see a single cent. Derek? Nothing either. The money they tried to steal from me would now pay for my new life. The day the house went up for sale, I drove by just once. The yard was uncut. The porch light flickered. The air around it was still, like a ghost had finally stopped whispering. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel triumphant either. I just felt free. A month later, I used my share of the sale to buy my own place, a cozy loft downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed brick, and the kind of silence that didn't weigh like shame. I started traveling again. Took a 2-week trip to Portugal. Climbed cliffs. Ate pastry at midnight. Slept without checking my bank account. I even started my own consulting firm, and within 6 months, I had 5 clients and more income than I ever made in the corporate world. Because I wasn't just a girl. I was a woman who'd been underestimated her whole life and had finally weaponized that silence. Then came the final twist. I received a letter. From Derek. I know you think you won, Emma. But this family will never forgive you. You've burned every bridge. I folded the letter gently. Put it in a drawer. Then pulled out a copy of my will. In it, I'd written one clause. Just one, bold and clear. No part of my estate will ever go to my parents or my brother. My assets will be donated to scholarships for young women in STEM, especially those told they were just girls. That was my revenge. Not just taking back what was mine, but making sure that the cycle of dismissal ended with me. It had been nearly a year since I'd walked away from that house. Since I'd watched it sell, split the profits, and cut ties with the people who had raised me but never truly seen me. My life had become quieter, more peaceful. No more whispered betrayals. No more playing second to a man who never earned it. I had moved on. Or so I thought. Because closure doesn't always arrive with clean edges. Sometimes, it breaks the silence with a knock on the door. And one morning, that knock came. I was sipping coffee in my sunlit kitchen when it happened. A sharp, polite rap 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 on the door. I opened it expecting a delivery driver. Instead, I found an older woman, late 60s, with gray streaked hair and a purse clutched tightly in both hands. Her eyes were familiar, in a way I couldn't place. She was nervous. Pale. Emma Carter? She asked. Yes. She took a deep breath. I used to be your nanny. When you were a baby. My name is Elaine. I blinked. I don't remember you. You wouldn't. You were just a few months old when I left. But I saw your name in the paper, the house sale, the court case. And I had to come. Why? I asked. She looked around, lowered her voice. Because you don't know the full story. We sat in my living room. She refused tea, but her hands trembled in her lap. I let her speak, even though part of me braced for nonsense. But what she said next changed everything. I was there when you were born, she began. But I was also there the night your father made the deal with your uncle. I frowned. What deal? Elaine swallowed hard. Your grandfather, the one who left that inheritance, didn't just leave it to your parents. Originally, he left everything to you. What? You were the first grandchild. He adored you. The trust was written with your name on it, specifically. But your dad and his brother convinced him you'd be better off if it was held by your parents until you were older. Wait, held for me? She nodded. But after your grandfather died, they never gave it to you. They funneled it to Derek instead. I felt the world tilt sideways. All those years. The house. The debt. The trust fund. The missing support. And now this? They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd stolen what was already mine. Elaine pulled something from her purse, a wrinkled, yellowing document. A copy of the original trust draft. My name, in faded ink, at the top. For my granddaughter, Emma Jane Carter, who will grow to lead, not follow. I stared at it, unable to breathe. They made your grandfather believe it would be safer if they handled things. But it was always meant for you. When I saw what happened last year, I knew. It was time you found out. I sat back, stunned. Speechless. This wasn't just betrayal. This was generational theft. They hadn't forgotten me. They had targeted me. From the beginning. That night, I lit a candle and reread the trust document again and again. The words blurred with tears I hadn't allowed myself in months. My grandfather had seen me. Before anyone else did. He knew I was capable. Strong. Worthy. And they buried it because they couldn't control it. Because they couldn't control me. I contacted the estate lawyer again. Asked him to verify Elaine's copy. He did, and then dropped a bombshell of his own. There's still a portion of your grandfather's estate unclaimed, he said. A forgotten land parcel. If the original trust holds weight, it's yours. A week later, I signed the title to a 6-acre property just outside the city. Overgrown. Wild. Forgotten. But it was mine. Truly mine. I stood in the middle of that land, breathing in the cool, clean air. No ghosts. No betrayals. Just earth. Roots. A beginning. And that's where I built it. The Carter Women Foundation. A place for young women who were told they weren't enough. A scholarship program. Mentorship. Housing for girls aging out of foster care. Coding boot camps. Microloans. Funded by what was supposed to be mine all along. Not just money, but legacy. I didn't burn my family down with lawsuits, though I could have. I did something colder. I erased their version of the story and rewrote my own. So if you ask me today who I am, I'm not the daughter who got overlooked. I'm not the sister who got pushed aside. I'm not just a girl. I'm the woman who turned betrayal into blueprint and revenge into rebirth.